Remember the exact moment it happened. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock. Slow, steady, calm. His phone was lying on the coffee table. Then it lit up. The screen facing up, the dark glass reflecting the ceiling light. A soft blue glow in the middle of the afternoon. At it without thinking. I wish I could say I turned away. I wish I could say I respected his privacy. But I didn't. I leaned forward and read the name on the screen. And before he ever had the chance to see it, I deleted the message. He would still be alive if I hadn't. That is the truth I carry every day. That is the truth that sits with me when I wake up and when I try to sleep. People call it a tragedy. They call it fate. They call it a freak accident. But fate is a lazy word. Fate is what people say when they don't want to look closely at what really happened. There was no fate that afternoon. There was a phone. There was a message. And there was my thumb pressing delete. Daniel Carter was the kind of man people admired, confident, successful, the type who walked into a room and owned it without trying. We met in college. He was bold. I was careful. He spoke loudly. I listened. Somehow, we became best friends. He used to joke that I was his shadow because I was always there. At business events, at family dinners, at every celebration of his success. Everyone thought it was loyalty. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was something else. Daniel built his company from nothing and sold it for millions before he turned 33. He married the woman he loved. He bought the big house. He flew first class even when he didn't need to. And I stood next to him through it all, smiling, clapping, congratulating him, watching him live the life I once imagined for myself. That afternoon, he was upstairs getting ready for an important flight, a private jet, a deal that would make him even richer. He left his phone downstairs. If it rings, just check who it is, he told me before going up the stairs. He trusted me completely. That was always the strange part. The phone buzzed once. I glanced at the screen. The name made my chest tighten. Dr. Harris. Daniel. Had been waiting for medical test results. It buzzed again. Just some heart tests to be safe. He said it was nothing serious. But he had been nervous all week. I picked up the phone. The preview on the screen showed only a few words. Daniel, do not get on that flight. My heart started racing. I unlocked the phone. He had given me his passcode months ago. Laughing, saying he had nothing to hide from me. I read the full message. The doctor said the results were worse than expected. Severe risk. High altitude could trigger cardiac arrest. He needed immediate treatment. He must not fly under any condition. I read it twice. Then a third time. I could have handed him the phone and saved his life. Instead, I stood there thinking. Thoughts I had buried for years. I thought about how tired I was of standing beside him. How tired I was of watching him win. I thought about how his wife once confessed, in a small, drunken moment, before their wedding that she used to wonder what it would be like to date someone quieter, someone like me. She laughed after saying it, but she never took it back. I told myself I didn't want Daniel dead. I told myself I just wanted him to fail once, just once. I wanted the deal to fall apart. I wanted him to cancel the flight, lose something important, feel small for a change. I didn't believe he would actually die. I convinced myself the doctor was being dramatic. I convinced myself that rich men with private doctors are always told scary things. I convinced myself of many things in less than a minute. Then I deleted the message. I deleted it from the inbox, then from the trash folder, completely gone. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been. By the time Daniel came downstairs, smiling and adjusting his watch, there was no sign that anything had happened. Ready? He asked. Always, I said. The plane took off at 3:17 p.m. At 4:02 p.m., I received the call. Cardiac arrest midair. They tried to land. They tried to resuscitate him. It was sudden, they said. Unexpected. Tragic. There was nothing anyone could have done. At the funeral, I stood next to his wife as she cried into my shoulder. She called me his brother. She said he was lucky to have had me in his life. People told me to stay strong. They praised my loyalty. They had no idea the same hands that held her steady were The hands that erased the warning that could have saved him. The funeral felt like a performance. I wore the black suit Daniel bought me for my last birthday. Italian wool. Expensive. Perfect fit. I stood beside the polished wooden casket like the loyal brother everyone believed I was. Even in death, he was still the center of the room. He was still the light. When they lowered the casket into the ground and the first shovel of dirt hit the lid, people began to cry harder. I didn't. When a man like Daniel dies, his digital life does not disappear. It stays alive. Emails, accounts, messages, portals, everything. Still waiting for him to respond. And I still had his iPad. He left it in my car the night before the flight, in the middle of the shock and confusion. Nobody remembered it. Nobody asked. That device became mine, without effort. Every time a message came in, I felt something I did not expect. Control. I was the one seeing everything. First, I was the one deciding what mattered and what disappeared. 3 days after the funeral, a notification appeared that made my stomach turn cold. Subject, urgent, following up on previous alerts. From Dr. Eris Harris. Daniel, I've tried calling and texting. I can see from the patient portal that alerts were sent on the 14th and the 16th. I need to know why you have not responded. If you have not seen those messages, call me immediately. I need to know why you have not responded. If you have not seen those messages, call me immediately. Been slowly disconnecting him from his own survival, one small setting at a time. You're doing it again. The voice behind me made me jump. I nearly dropped the iPad. It was Eve, Daniel's wife. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her skin looked pale in the hallway light. She looked thinner already, like grief was eating her from the inside. She looked at the device in my hands, going through his things. She asked softly, "You were always the organized one. He depended on you for that." "I just don't want anything important to be missed," I said. And that was true. I just didn't explain what I meant by important. "I don't know what I would have done without you these last few days," she whispered. "Daniel always said you were steady. He said you were the only person in his life who didn't want anything from him." "I'm here for you, Eve," I said. "Whatever you need." "The lawyers are coming tomorrow," she said, leaning lightly against me. "They need to talk about the estate, the insurance policy, and the merger deal." They said because the agreement didn't close before the flight, there could be problems. The merger, that was the reason Daniel got on that plane. The deal worth millions. The deal that would secure everything. If the deal never closed, then the company was not strong. It was fragile, full of loans, full of expectations that were never fulfilled. As I stood there holding his grieving wife, I felt something close to fear. I had wanted Daniel to lose something. I had wanted him to fail for once, but I hadn't calculated this part. If the company collapsed, there would be no empire to step into, no security, no quiet transfer of power, just debt, investigations, headlines. That night, I went home and opened the iPad again. I did not open the doctor's emails. Not yet. Instead, I checked the deleted browser history, and I found something I was not prepared to see. A week before his death, Daniel had searched for more than heart specialists. He had searched how to change a primary beneficiary, quietly, business partner liability, in medical neglect cases, private investigator near me. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. The next morning the house was. Eve was already awake. She was sitting at the kitchen table, with a cup of coffee she had barely touched. "You didn't sleep either, did you?" she asked when she saw me. I shook my head. Not really. That was the truth, but not for the reason she believed. My mind had been racing all night, replaying what I saw in Daniel's browser history, the searches, the investigator, the possibility that he had begun looking into me, even in death. Daniel was still influencing everything around him. It was almost impressive. "The lawyers should be here soon," Eve said quietly. "I hate this part. It feels like we're dividing his life into paperwork." "The lawyers should be here soon," Eve said quietly. I sat across from her. "It's just procedure," I said. "They'll explain everything." For a moment she just stared into her cup. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. Daniel trusted you more than anyone. I forced myself to stay calm. We trusted each other. He always said if anything ever happened to him, you would help me handle everything. The business, the accounts, all of it. I don't understand any of that world. Of course she didn't. Daniel had built a world full of numbers, contracts, and strategy, and he had always kept Eve away from the complicated parts. It was his way of protecting her, or maybe controlling the narrative of his life. Either way, it meant one thing now. If the company was unstable, I would be the only person in the room who understood how deep the problem really was. The doorbell rang. Two lawyers walked in carrying thick folders and quiet expressions. They introduced themselves politely, shook our hands, and sat at the dining table. Everything about them was calm and professional. They spoke the language of estate planning and financial responsibility. They explained Daniel's insurance policy, his investments, and the structure of the company. Then one of the lawyers opened another folder and said something that made the room colder. There is one complication regarding the merger Daniel was finalizing. I felt my pulse quicken. The agreement was scheduled to close after the flight. Since Daniel passed before signing the final documents, the investors are reconsidering their position. Without Daniel personally leading the transition, they may withdraw from the deal. You've looked confused. What does that mean exactly? It means, the lawyer said carefully, that the company could face financial pressure in the coming months if leadership is not stabilized quickly. Eve looked at me immediately, almost instinctively. Daniel always said Marcus understood the company better than anyone. One of them leaned forward slightly. Mr. Daniel did mention your name in several internal documents. You were involved in operational planning. In situations like this, continuity is important. Continuity. Another word that sounded innocent but carried weight. Eve reached across the table and gently placed her hand on mine. Marcus has been helping me already, she said. I trust him. For years I had stood beside Daniel while he made decisions that changed everything around him. Now the room was quiet, waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to step into the space he left behind. I'll help however I can, I said finally. While everyone in that room was worried about the company surviving Daniel's death, I was thinking about something much simpler. Daniel had spent years building a life that revolved around him. His house, his company, his wife, his legacy. And now all of it was floating in uncertain space, waiting for someone steady enough to hold it together. That night, after the lawyers left, Eve walked me to the door. She looked exhausted, but there was relief in her eyes. Thank you for staying through all that, she said. I don't know how I would face this alone. You don't have to, I said quietly. Daniel was lucky to have you, she whispered. I said nothing. As I walked back to my car, I looked up at the dark windows of the house Daniel had once filled with noise and ambition. For years I had been the man, standing just outside his life. The friend, the helper, the shadow. The problem with dead men is that they leave questions behind. Living people ask questions too. Why was he searching for a private investigator? That question stayed in my head. For 2 days, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was investigating a competitor. Maybe he was dealing with a business problem. Daniel was always involved in complicated deals. Hiring investigators was not impossible. But deep down, I knew that explanation was weak. The search history was too specific. Private investigator near me. How to track someone quietly. Signs of financial betrayal and partnerships. Those were not the searches of a man checking on competitors. Those were the searches of a man who believed someone close to him was lying. So I did the only thing I could do. I decided to find the investigator before the investigator found me. The next morning, I started with Daniel's email archives. Years of messages were stored there. Contracts, invoices, legal documents, conversations with investors. If Daniel had hired someone, there would probably be a record somewhere. I searched for simple words first. Investigator. Security. The phone. Daniel's call logs were still connected to the tablet through his cloud account. I opened the records and started scrolling through the numbers from the last few weeks of his life. Most of them were familiar: investors, board members, lawyers, the usual people. But then I noticed something strange. One number appeared 3 times in the same week. No name attached, no saved contact, just a number. Each call lasted less than 2 minutes. Short conversations, careful conversations. I decided to call the number. Not immediately. I waited until evening, when the sky was already dark and the city felt quieter. My fingers hovered over the phone for a few seconds before pressing dial. The ringing sounded louder than it should have in the silent room. Then someone answered. Hello. The voice was calm, older, careful. Said the first thing that came to mind. Hi. I'm trying to reach Daniel Carter. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long one. I think you have the wrong number, the man said slowly. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at the phone. He hung up too quickly. That was the moment I knew I had found the right person. Daniel really had hired someone. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something close to real fear. Because if Daniel had been investigating me before he died, then somewhere out there was a man whose job was to finish asking questions. And investigators don't stop asking questions just because their client disappears. Sometimes a mystery like that only makes them more interested. The time I returned to Eve's house, after everything had settled, the silence felt different. The funeral was over. The lawyers had stopped calling every day. The neighbors had stopped bringing food. Grief had moved into its quiet stage. I stood outside her door for a moment before knocking. The porch light flickered softly above me. For a second, I knocked. Eve opened the door a few seconds later. Her hair was tied loosely, and she looked tired, in a way sleep could not fix. But when she saw me, her face softened a little. Marcus, she said quietly. You came. Just checking on you. She stepped
aside to let me in. The house smelled
faintly like coffee and old books. Daniel's presence was still everywhere. His jacket hung on the chair near the hallway. His shoes were still by the door. Eve followed my eyes and sighed. I can't move them yet, she said softly. It feels wrong. You don't have to. Eve sat on the couch and wrapped her arms around herself. You've been very kind, Marcus, she said after a while. Most people disappear after the funeral. I shrugged slightly. Daniel was my brother. I'm not going anywhere. That word again. Brother. People love that word. It made everything sound loyal. I keep thinking about the last day, she whispered. The last conversation we had. My chest tightened slightly, but I kept my face calm. What did you talk about? I asked. She frowned, trying to remember. Nothing important. Just normal things. Work. Dinner. He seemed distracted, though. Distracted. That word echoed in my mind. Of course he was distracted. Do you ever get that feeling? She said slowly, like something happened that you didn't notice at the time? I felt the air in the room grow heavier. What do you mean? She shook her head quickly. Maybe it's nothing. Just my mind trying to make sense of things. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice the way someone does when they care deeply. Eve, sometimes tragedies don't have answers. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I was the one who stayed. When I stood up to leave, she walked me to the door. Thank you for coming, she said. It gets lonely here. I paused for a moment, letting the silence sit between us. You don't have to be alone, I said gently. We could go through some of Daniel's things. I don't think I can do it alone. I nodded slowly. Of course. She smiled weakly and closed the door behind me. Everything was moving exactly the way I expected. Step by step, Eve was pulling me closer into Daniel's life, into his house, into his memories. Eve believed I was the one person she could trust. That belief was powerful, powerful enough to change everything. But trust is a fragile thing. And if the wrong person started asking the right questions, the entire story could collapse. And if that happened, Eve might finally learn the truth, that the man comforting her was also the man who erased the message that could have saved her husband. 3 days after I visited Eve, she called. Me again. Her voice sounded tired. But there was something else in it, too. Something uncertain. Marcus, she said quietly on the phone. Are you busy? No, I said. What's wrong? She hesitated. I started going through Daniel's office this morning. That was the one place in the house I had avoided. Okay, I said carefully. Did you find something? I don't know, she replied. Maybe it's nothing. But it felt strange. I grabbed my keys without thinking. I'll come over. 20 minutes. Later, I was standing inside Daniel's office for the first time since his death. Eve stood near the desk holding a small brown envelope. This was inside one of his drawers, she said, under some files. I walked closer slowly. What's in it? She handed it to me. The paper felt. I opened it carefully. Inside were 3 things: a photograph, a business card, and a folded piece of paper. I looked at the photograph first. It was a picture of me and Daniel, standing outside our office building. Eve frowned. Why would Daniel keep that? She asked. I didn't answer. My eyes had moved to the business card. My stomach dropped. The name printed on the card read, Samuel Pike, private investigator. The same words Daniel had searched for on his computer the week before he died. Do you know who that is? She asked. I forced my voice to stay calm. No, I said. Never heard of him. That was a lie. Had never met him, but I knew exactly why Daniel had hired him. My hands moved to the folded paper. I opened it slowly. The note was short, only 2 sentences, but they made the room feel suddenly smaller. It said, if anything happens to me, this man has the full report. Trust the evidence, not the people around you. Eve read the note over my shoulder. I could feel her body stiffen. Marcus, what does that mean? She asked quietly. My mind was racing. Daniel had left a message behind, a warning, and somewhere out there, this investigator had a full report. A report about what? About me? About the company? About the things Daniel had started to notice? I folded the note carefully and placed it back in the envelope. It's probably nothing, I said. Daniel was under a lot of stress before the merger. Eve had insisted I take it. You're better at handling these things, she said. I sat in my car again, staring at the investigator's business card under the faint light of the dashboard. Samuel Pike. If Daniel had hired him, then that meant someone had been watching, asking questions. Then somewhere there was a report, waiting to be opened. A report that could destroy everything I had built since the day Daniel died. Now I had a new problem. I wasn't the only one looking for answers anymore. And sooner or later, I was going to have to find Samuel Pike before he found me. People think the worst moment in a man's life is the moment he commits the crime. They are wrong. The worst moment is the moment he realizes the crime never really ended. It had been 6 weeks since Daniel's funeral. 6 quiet, careful weeks of stepping deeper into the life he left behind. I was now in the house almost every day. Eve depended on me for everything. The lawyers spoke to me first before speaking to her. The company meetings happened in Daniel's office, but I sat in his chair. Slowly, gently, I had begun replacing him. That was always the plan. But plans are fragile things. Because one night, everything changed. I was alone in Daniel's office again. Eve had gone upstairs to sleep early. The house was silent except for the soft humming sound of the air conditioner. Then I noticed something strange. The bottom of the drawer felt slightly raised. I pressed my fingers against the wooden panel and it shifted. A hidden compartment. For a long moment, I simply stared at it. My mind already knew what it might contain. The report Daniel mentioned. The one from the investigator. I plugged it into Daniel's laptop. I clicked it. Daniel's face appeared on the screen. Alive. Calm. Sitting right here in this office. He looked straight into the camera, like he knew exactly who would be watching. Marcus, he said. If you're seeing this, Daniel continued. Then something happened. To me, the room felt suddenly smaller. The missing money, the strange account transfers, the deals that didn't make sense. My breathing grew heavier. I hired a private investigator 2 weeks ago, he said. Not because I wanted to destroy you, but because I needed to know the truth. And the truth is, you've been quietly destroying everything I built. My hand moved toward the laptop, but I couldn't stop watching. I was planning to confront you after the merger trip, he said, face to face. I wanted to hear your side before making any decisions. He paused for a moment. But if something happens to me before that conversation, then I need the truth to survive me. My mouth felt dry. Daniel leaned closer to the camera. So here's the part you don't know, Marcus. This video was automatically sent to 3 people the moment my phone stopped responding for more than 48 hours. The air left my lungs. Daniel continued quietly. My lawyer, my doctor, and the investigator. My vision blurred for a second. Daniel looked straight into the camera again. And if you're watching this now, it means you already know why I didn't make that flight. The video ended. Just like that. Silence filled the office again. But the silence felt different now. He knew. Daniel knew. Not everything, but enough. Enough to start digging. Enough to prepare for the possibility that he might not survive. I slowly closed the laptop. For the first time since the day I deleted that message, I understood something terrifying. Daniel hadn't lost the game. He had simply moved the final move into the future. Because somewhere out there tonight, 3 other people had already seen the truth, and they were probably already on their way.